What really happens when you swear it's just a work meeting and your husband asks what your boss's wife would think? How far can a man go using only facts, records, and the law when his wife turns him into the villain in front of friends, family, and the internet? Can she still call him controlling when the papers arrive in a crowded lobby and everyone sees the result? Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. Ariane, that is my name, and I am not the villain people say I am. At least, that is what I told myself when all of this started with one simple work meeting. I said it was just drinks with my boss at the hotel lobby bar. I said it was about my promotion, my future, my value. When my husband, Elias, asked what Damien's wife would think about our little meeting, I laughed and asked why he was so weird about everything. In my head, I was the modern wife, the one who had a career and options. He was the boring IT guy who did not understand how things work now. I told him if he trusted me, he would not question who I met after hours. I said respect follows results, and I had results at work. The problem is, once you decide you are right, you stop looking at the lines you cross. You ignore the way your boss's hand stays on your back too long. You ignore the look in your husband's eyes when you come home late, smelling like another man's cologne and hotel air. You call it insecurity, not warning. The night that started, everything did not feel big. It felt small and normal, like any work night where I came home late, and Elias waited in the kitchen with that tired look on his face. He asked where I had been. I told him I was at a work meeting. He asked what kind of meeting needed to be in a hotel lobby bar at 9 in the evening. I said it was the kind that came with a higher bonus. He asked why it had to be just me and my boss, Damien. I rolled my eyes and said he was being paranoid again. I remember how he leaned against the counter, arms folded. He looked at me as if he was trying to solve a problem on his screen. He said he worried how it would look. I said he should worry more about his own life and less about how things look. I told him men and women could meet for drinks and talk about work. He said he understood that, but asked what Damien's wife would think. I laughed and asked why he always made things weird. Inside, I felt annoyed more than guilty. I had put in long hours. I was the one who made presentations, handled clients, stayed late to fix problems. Damien saw that. He praised me in meetings. He asked my opinion in front of the team. He told me I had real talent. Elias fixed servers for companies that did not even know his name. Of course, I felt closer to the person who actually saw my worth. That morning, I had already decided to say yes when Damien asked for quick drinks to talk about the new account. He leaned in my doorway at the office and said he wanted to go over strategy somewhere quiet. I told him I could stay late and talk in the meeting room. He smiled and said the meeting rooms were booked and he knew a hotel lobby bar across the street that was perfect. I told him I guessed that worked. He said it would be good for my growth. It sounded almost harmless. At lunch, I told Cassie about it. She gave me that bright, hungry smile and said it was a good sign. She said bosses did not invite just anyone to hotel bars. She asked if I was going to tell Elias. I told her, of course, I was not hiding anything. She told me husbands could be dramatic about mixing work and drinks, and said I had to train him not to freak out. I laughed because it sounded true. When I got home that evening, Elias was at the table with his laptop. He said he had finished work early. He asked how my day was. I said it was fine, and that I had a little thing after work tomorrow. He asked what kind of thing. I told him my boss wanted to talk strategy over drinks. He asked if anyone else would be there. I said no, because no one else needed to be there. He went quiet for a second. He said he did not like the idea. I said it was not about what he liked. It was my job. He tried again. He said he trusted me, but he did not trust Damien. I told him that sounded like a him problem. I said a man who trusted his wife would not ask so many questions. I reminded him that my salary mattered now, that I was not just some little wife sitting at home. He said he never said I was. I told him he acted like it anyway. I watched his face shut down a little more. When I went to put my bag away, I saw something odd on the hallway unit. There was a new folder in the drawer, labeled Household, in his neat print. Before, we always had a messy pile of bills and letters. Now it was organized. I opened it, curious. He came up behind me and asked if I needed something from there. I said I was just looking. He said he was finally sorting the bills, so things were not lost all the time. I made a small joke that he was becoming an old man with his little folders. He did not laugh much. Later that night, when I went to the bedroom, he was still in the living area with the lights low. His laptop screen lit his face. I could see some kind of spreadsheet, rows, dates, numbers. When he heard me behind him, he pressed a key, and the window shrank to the corner. He said he was checking something for work. I asked why he had to hide a boring spreadsheet. He said he was not hiding, just closing. I shrugged. In bed, I scrolled through my phone, reading Cassie's messages. She asked what I would wear for the hotel bar. She said I should look sharp but not thirsty. I told her I was married, not desperate. She replied that married women could still enjoy being admired. I liked that line. It made me feel clever. The next morning, while I made coffee, Elias's phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with a calendar reminder that said, Library 10:40 a.m. I frowned. He never went to the library. I asked if he had started a book club. He took his phone and said he was just running an errand on his lunch break, somewhere quiet to think. I teased him and asked if he needed to think about how jealous he was. He did a small, tired smile and said he needed to think about some things. Yes. I said he could try thinking less and trusting more. On my way to work, Phoebe called. I told her about the hotel bar meeting. She laughed and said Elias would flip. I said he already made a comment about what Damien's wife would think. She snorted and said that sounded like something Dad would say. She reminded me that I was not Dad's little girl anymore. I liked hearing that. She said men had to adapt or get left behind. I repeated that sentence in my head all day. At the office, I worked hard. I told myself that proved I deserved the meeting. In the open plan space, people could see me walk into Damien's office when he waved me in. He closed the glass door halfway. He said I had done a great job on the account. He asked if I was still okay for drinks later. I said yes, as long as it did not go too late. He asked if my husband was the strict type. I laughed and said he worried too much, but he would get used to it. Damien shrugged and said as long as I was fine, everything was fine. On my break, I looked at our wedding photo on my phone. Elias had that same gentle look as always. For a moment, something in my chest pulled. Then I thought about the way he had asked, over and over, about Damien's wife. I told myself he did not see my growth. I told myself he wanted me small. That evening, I changed into a nicer blouse at the office. Cassie whistled softly and said Damien would definitely notice. I laughed and said it was not about that. She raised her eyebrows. I told her I was just using the tools I had. She said that was what men did all the time. When I got home to pick up my lipstick, Elias was in the hallway, tying his shoes. He said he was going to take Mila to his mother's for the evening. He asked if that was okay. I said, of course, I was busy anyway. He said he hoped the meeting went well. I smiled and asked if he was sure he could handle it. He looked at me for a long second, then said he would manage. As I walked out, I heard a sound from the guest room, a low mechanical whir. Curious, I glanced in. The small printer we almost never used was on the desk. It spat out a single blank page. The room smelled like toner. Elias stepped in behind me and reached past to turn it off. He said the printer was acting up. I laughed and told him he was being dramatic over a piece of paper. I closed the door and checked my phone. I arrived at the hotel lobby bar 5 minutes late and told myself that was fine. Important people were always a little late. The place was warm and low lit, with soft music and small groups at tables. Damien was already there at a corner table, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up. He stood when he saw me and said I looked sharp. I laughed and said it was just a blouse, nothing special, but inside I liked that he noticed. He ordered drinks without really asking and said we had a lot to go through. I told him I was ready. He talked about numbers, clients, the new account. He leaned in when he spoke, like everything I said mattered a lot. He asked what my long-term plan was at the company. I told him I wanted to move up from coordinator, maybe lead a small team. He nodded and said he could see that. Every time he said he believed in me, I felt warmer than the drink made me feel. He told me the others did not work as hard as I did. He said he noticed I stayed late. I told him I had to work twice as hard because I did not come from a fancy school. He said that was what made me hungry, and that hunger was good. When his hand brushed my elbow, I did not move it away. It felt natural, like the way people touched in movies when something was about to happen. I kept checking my phone, pretending I was being responsible. There were messages from Cassie asking if Damien had complimented me yet. She wrote that married women were dangerous in the best way. I sent her a photo of my drink and said everything was fine. I did not text Elias. I told myself there was no need. He already knew where I was. After a while, the talk about work slowed down. Damien started asking about my life. He asked how long I had been married. I told him almost 8 years. He asked what my husband did. I said he worked in IT, then added that he was a bit old-fashioned. Damien gave a half smile and said that made sense. I asked what that was supposed to mean. He said some men had a hard time with their wives, having male friends or male bosses. I said my husband trusted me, but sometimes he got in his head. I did not tell him about the argument in the kitchen. Damien reached across the small table at one point and touched my hand when he was making a point. He left it there a second too long. I did not pull away. I told myself it was fine and that people in our industry were more physical, more open. When he stood to go to the bar, he put a hand on my shoulder, fingers pressing lightly. It was not a big thing, but it sat on my skin like a mark. Time moved fast. By the time I noticed the clock on the wall, it was past 9. I said I should go soon, that Elias had taken Mila to his mother's. Damien said he did not want to cause trouble for me. I told him it was not trouble, just drama. I added that my husband sometimes overreacted. Damien said he hoped I was not paying a price for being good at my job. I liked the way that sounded. I smiled and said some people just did not understand what real ambition looked like. When we left the lobby bar, Damien walked me outside. The air was cooler than the room. He asked if I needed a ride. I said Elias was probably on his way. Damien said he would wait with me until my ride arrived. He stepped a little closer than necessary. For a moment, under the hotel lights, it felt like something might happen. I thought about leaning in. Then I heard my name. I turned and saw Elias standing near the curb, hands in his pockets. He had that still, tight look in his face. He walked toward us, calm, not rushing. He asked if everything went well. I said it did and that we had a very productive talk. Damien held out his hand, introduced himself properly, and said I was a star on the team. Elias shook his hand, said he appreciated the feedback. His tone was polite, but his eyes stayed on Damien's hand on my lower back. Damien seemed to notice and stepped back a little. Elias asked if Damien's wife ever joined for these late meetings. His voice stayed soft. Damien laughed a little and said his wife was busy with their kids most evenings. The way he said it made me feel like a child myself. Elias nodded and said that made sense. Then he looked at me and said we should get going so I could rest. I heard the words, but what I felt was a quiet judgment. As we walked to the parking garage, I hissed that he had made it awkward. He asked how. I said he did not have to bring up the wife or make it sound like something shady. He said he only asked because I had said it was a work thing. He added that work things usually did not look like that. His hand, my laugh, the late hour. I told him he was reading too much into nothing. I said he always did this, turn normal life into suspicion. Inside the parking garage, the echo of our steps made everything louder. He unlocked the car and opened the passenger door for me. I slid in with a loud sigh. When he got in, he sat for a moment without starting the engine. He asked again if I understood how it looked. I said it looked fine to anyone who was not insecure. I told him Damien respected me and believed in me in ways he never did. That one landed. I saw it. He asked if I really believed that. I said maybe I did. I told him he only ever saw the risks, not the chances. He went quiet. He took out his phone to set the GPS for his mother's house to pick up Mila. For a second, the screen tilted toward me. I saw a message thread near the top of his list named Follow Up. There were recent timestamps. When he noticed my eyes on the screen, he angled it away and said it was work. We drove in silence for a while. At a red light, his phone buzzed again. This time, only a short preview popped up at the top, a message that looked like a number and a word I did not catch, from a contact saved with just a little gavel emoji. My stomach tightened. I asked who used emojis for names on his phone. He pressed the lock button and said some work contacts preferred privacy. I scoffed and said he was the one talking about how things looked. When we got home later, the apartment felt too quiet. Mila was not back yet. Ruth had asked to keep her for a sleepover. I kicked off my shoes in the hallway. On the small cabinet where we kept keys and mail, there was an envelope, only half slid into the outgoing tray. It was unsealed, the flap open. I could see only a blank top page. I reached out and picked it up. It felt heavier than a normal bill. Elias came in behind me and took it gently from my hand. He said he would drop it off tomorrow. I asked what it was. He said it was something he needed to send, just admin. I asked if it was about money. He said we would talk later. That annoyed me. I said if it was about our money, I had the right to know. He said it was not the time. He put the envelope into his bag and walked away down the hall. I went to the bedroom, stripped down, and stood in front of the mirror. My skin smelled like perfume and hotel air, and faintly like Damien where his hand had been. I thought about Elias's face, his quiet questions, his phone with the emoji contact. I told myself he was just trying to scare me into backing down from my career. I told myself I would not let him. I woke the next morning with a small headache and the sense that something had shifted. At work, I walked in holding my coffee, ready to tell Cassie all about Damien's praise. I had barely reached my desk when my manager stepped out from a side room and called my name. He said we should have a quick word. I walked in, heart beating fast. On the small table in front of him, a tablet lay face up, screen paused on a photo of me at the hotel bar, leaning toward Damien with his hand on my back. I did not know who took the photo on the tablet, but I knew right away what it looked like. I saw my head tilted back in a laugh, Damien's hand low on my back, our bodies too close. My manager sat across from me, hands folded. He said some concerns had been raised. I asked what kind of concerns. He said someone had sent this photo to HR with a note about boundaries and favoritism. My mouth went dry. He asked if there was anything he should know about my relationship with Damien. I said it was professional. He asked if I felt pressured in any way. I almost laughed at that, but I kept my face calm. I said I was not pressured. I said Damien simply valued my work and treated me like a rising talent. My manager nodded slowly. He said perception mattered. I said perception was not my job, results were. He reminded me that results could be ruined by small things that looked wrong. I told him I was a married adult, not a teenager. I said I could drink with my boss and still be faithful. I added that my husband sometimes struggled with jealousy, and maybe someone close to him had sent the photo to stir trouble. My manager gave me a look that said he did not want to be in the middle. He said to be careful and to keep things strictly professional from now on. I agreed, even as a small voice inside me said I had done nothing wrong. When I got back to my desk, Cassie slid over and asked what happened. I told her some coward had sent HR a picture, like we were in high school. She raised her eyebrows and asked if I thought it was Elias. I said I would not put it past him. She said I should turn it right back on him, tell people he was controlling and tried to ruin my career. That idea felt good and sour at the same time. At home that afternoon, I found Elias at the dining table, laptop open, papers spread out. There were new binders stacked neatly, one labeled home, one auto, one bank. Before, we shoved everything into a drawer. Now, everything had tabs and sections. He looked up when I came in. He asked how my day went. I said it was annoying and that someone had tattled to HR. He asked what they had said. I told him about the photo, about the talk. I said my manager knew it was nothing, just image stuff. He said calmly that maybe I could understand now how things looked, at least to other people. I told him people saw what they wanted. I said jealous people saw dirt in everything. He did not argue. He just turned back to his laptop. I glanced at the screen and saw a spreadsheet again, with names and dates in small cells. It looked too neat, too careful. When he saw my eyes there, he clicked a key and the window closed. I moved closer and picked up the binder labeled bank. I flipped it open and saw our account printouts, lines highlighted, notes in the margins. I asked why he was suddenly into paperwork. He said we had been messy for too long, and he wanted to understand where our money went. I told him it sounded like he did not trust me with spending. He said he wanted clarity, not control. I said those were the same thing, really. He said not always. The printer behind him suddenly clicked in Word, then spit out a blank page. The smell of toner spread through the room. It made the whole scene feel colder. Later that week, we were invited to a family dinner at a busy restaurant. Long table, birthday balloons, noisy kids. I almost told Elias I did not want to go. Then I realized it was the perfect stage. People would ask how we were. I could set the story my way. On the drive there, he kept his eyes on the road. His phone on the dashboard lit up with a calendar reminder that said, meeting. Personal 4:35 p.m. I frowned and asked what personal meeting he had. He tapped it away and said he had some things to take care of after work the next day. I asked if it was a therapist. He said no, just something he needed to handle. I laughed and said at least one of us had time for extra meetings. At the restaurant, my sister Phoebe waved us over. Ruth and Jenna were already seated, along with some cousins and friends. The table was full of noise and plates. For a while, everything felt normal. Mila sat between Ruth and Elias, happy, talking about school. I tried to enjoy the food, the chatter, but I could feel the tension like a wire. It did not take long. Phoebe asked how work was. I said it was intense, with late meetings and big accounts. She asked, with a knowing smile, if my boss still liked hotel bars. A few people laughed. Ruth looked at me, eyebrows drawn. Elias set down his fork. I decided to lean into it. I told them Elias had shown up at the hotel like some jealous movie husband. I said he had basically interrogated my boss right outside the lobby. People laughed nervously. Elias said very softly that he had just asked a question. I said he had asked what Damien's wife would think, like some old church elder. That got a bigger laugh. I watched Elias's jaw tighten. Jenna spoke then. She said she had never seen him act controlling. She said he always respected me. I told her that was because she was not there late at night when he started in about boundaries and appearances. I said he played the reasonable man, but underneath he could not stand that I had a life outside him. Jenna looked from him to me and back. She asked if I was sure I was being fair. That made me angry. I said men like Elias used concern to hide control. I said he was trying to make me choose between growing and staying small. I told them about the visit to HR, leaving out the part where my manager had warned me gently. I said my own husband had probably sent the photo to the company to make me look bad. Ruth's face changed at that. She asked Elias if it was true. He said no. He said he had not sent anything to anyone. He added that if people had concerns, maybe there was a reason. I rolled my eyes and said he was a master at playing the saint. After dessert, some of us went to a rooftop bar nearby. City lights, loud music, crowded. It was the kind of place where people took photos of everything. I felt pretty there, high above the street. Cassie joined us straight from work and hugged me like I was the center of the night. She asked if jealous husband was coming upstairs too. I said yes, and that he could learn what normal life looked like. On the rooftop, with drinks in hand, I let the story grow. I told a circle of friends how Elias had tried to embarrass me at the hotel. I said he acted like I was cheating just for doing my job. I left out the part where Damien's hand had rested too long on my back. People shook their heads and called him insecure. Cassie said some men did not deserve modern wives. Elias stood near the railing, talking quietly with Ruth. He did not join my circle. At one point, he came over and asked if we could stop discussing our marriage in public. He said it was not healthy. I laughed and asked if the truth made him nervous. I raised my glass and told the group that some men did not understand that respect followed results. I said I had results. One of the guys cheered and lifted his drink too. Cassie pulled out her phone and lifted it, camera open. She said we should toast to independent women with scared little husbands. I leaned against Elias's shoulder on purpose, smirking at the camera. He stiffened. He asked me quietly if we could talk later, alone. I said he should say whatever he wanted now. He shook his head, said he did not want to fight in front of everyone. I turned back to the crowd and told them he always said that when he wanted to control the story. I could see Ruth's discomfort. She touched my arm and asked if we could lower our voices. I pulled away and told her I was just being honest. I said hiding problems made them worse. She asked if there was something I wanted to tell her in private. I said no, everything important was already on the table. I liked the shock on some faces. It made me feel bold. In the middle of it all, as I laughed louder and talked about my jealous husband, I noticed Elias step back. He put a hand on the rail, looked out over the city, then took his phone out. The screen lit his face. I saw a faint notification glow, then disappear. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and watched Cassie filming as if he was memorizing every second. The hangover after the rooftop bar was not in my head. It was in the way people looked at us. The next morning, Ruth called and asked if we could come by for Sunday lunch. Her voice was careful. She said she wanted time with Mila and also wanted to talk. I told her we were fine and did not need a talk. She repeated that she would feel better if we came. When I told Elias, he just nodded and said we should go. That annoyed me more, because it sounded like he and his mother had already decided something. At Ruth's house, the TV was off, and the table was set too neatly. Mila ran in first, happy to see her grandmother. Ruth hugged her tight and held on a little longer than usual. Elias went to help in the kitchen. Jenna sat on the couch, scrolling her phone. When I came in, she looked up and said she had seen some of the rooftop videos. She asked if I really thought it was fair to talk about our marriage like that, with people filming. I said it was my life, and I could talk about it how I wanted. She pressed her lips together and went quiet. During lunch, the air felt thick. People tried small talk, but it always circled back. Ruth finally put down her fork and said she was worried. She said she had heard a version of the rooftop story from more than one person. She asked if things were all right between us. I told her we were just having normal marriage stress, and people like to exaggerate. She asked if there was something going on with my boss. I snapped that everyone needed to stop sexualizing work. She looked at Elias and asked if he felt disrespected. He said he felt hurt and embarrassed. Yes. He said it was difficult to watch his private life turned into a joke in public. I rolled my eyes and said he always made himself the victim. I told them I worked hard, and if I got praise from my boss, that was not a sin. I added that a man who truly respected me would not try to shame me for it. Jenna could not keep quiet. She asked if I understood that cheating did not have to be just physical. She said posting stories and letting people think my husband was some controlling monster was also a kind of betrayal. I laughed in her face. I said I was not cheating, I was networking. I said if Elias felt guilty, maybe that was his own conscience talking. Ruth asked very softly if there had been anything more than work between me and Damien. Just words, no anger, but her eyes were sharp. I felt a spark of panic and covered it with pride. I told her I was insulted she would even ask. I said I was tired of being treated like some teenager who could not choose her own friends. I told them all they were making a big deal out of one photo and some jokes. Elias did not argue. He just listened. Then he pulled a small notebook from his pocket and wrote something down while I was still talking. I stared at the pen moving. I asked what he was doing. He said he was noting dates and things said, so he did not get them wrong later. That felt like a slap, because it meant he was keeping score. I told him only controlling people kept little books. He said calmly that people who felt erased sometimes needed records. Ruth's face tightened when she heard that. After lunch, Mila begged to go to the park. Ruth said fresh air would help everyone. We walked together, but it did not feel like a family walk. Elias walked a few steps ahead with Mila, holding her hand. I walked with Phoebe, who had joined us. She whispered that everyone was acting like I had done something terrible. She said it made her sick. I told her they were all jealous because I refused to live a small, quiet life. She agreed and said men like Elias dragged women down. At the park, Mila ran to the swings. Elias pushed her gently, listening as she talked about school projects. I sat on a bench with Phoebe, talking louder than needed. I told her about HR and the tablet, but I framed it as them overreacting to a harmless picture. I said some anonymous snake had probably sent it in. I suggested it could even be Jenna. Phoebe shook her head and said it sounded like something a guilty husband would do. I looked over at Elias and let that thought settle in my mind like fact. A couple of other parents were nearby, close enough to hear pieces of our words. One of them glanced over when I said, "He just cannot stand that my boss respects me more than he does." I saw her eyes move from me to Elias and back. Her mouth tightened. I felt judged and hated it. To fight that feeling, I spoke even louder, calling Elias traditional, fragile, stuck in the past. I said modern women had to put up with a lot. When we walked back to Ruth's, the distance between us felt bigger. In the living room, Ruth asked Mila to go draw in the kitchen. When she was gone, Ruth told me she loved me but was worried about the choices I was making. She said the internet never forgot. She said words said on rooftops and bars had a way of coming back later. I said she was being dramatic. I told her this was just a rough patch and we would move on. Elias stood with his back partly turned, near the window, notebook in hand. He did not join in. He just listened again and wrote a couple more lines. I told him to stop writing like a detective in some movie. He said it helped him stay clear when stories changed. I said my story did not change. People just did not like it. He looked at me for a long time, then said nothing. That night at home, I went to get milk from the fridge and saw a bright sticky note stuck near the calendar. In his careful writing, it said, "Bring forms." A date on the wall planner next week was circled in red. I asked what forms he needed. He said it was just boring paperwork he was catching up on. I asked if it was for work. He said partly. I laughed and told him he had become very secretive for someone who claimed to love honesty. Later, after Mila was asleep, I walked past the guest bedroom. The door was slightly open. The small shredder we barely used sat beside the desk, humming softly and then stopping. I saw Elias sorting mail, tossing some things into a neat keep pile, and feeding others into the shredder. The air smelled like paper dust. I asked if he was shredding my things. He said he was getting rid of old junk and store ads. that we had kept too many useless papers. I said it felt like he was cleaning me out. He replied that he was cleaning space, not people. On his laptop, I glimpsed a small black box pop up, some kind of sync message. Before he could close it, I read the words, "File uploaded successfully." He shut the screen and asked if I needed something. I asked why he was suddenly obsessed with files. He said he was tired of living from one messy pile to the next. I said life was messy. He said some things needed to be clear. The next few days, I felt the weight in smaller ways. At school pickup, one of the other mothers gave me a fixed smile and did not come closer. I realized she followed me online and had probably seen my posts. Mila got in the back seat and buckled herself in, quieter than usual. Elias picked her up some days, and I picked her up on others, like an unstated plan we had never had before. One afternoon, I arrived early and waited in the line of cars. I saw Elias's car a few spots ahead. He was alone, scrolling on his phone. When Mila came out, a teacher guided her toward him. She hesitated and looked around, then spotted me. Her face brightened, then fell, when the teacher kept her heading to his car. That little dip in her expression made something twist in me. Later that week, when it was my turn, she slid into the back seat and asked in a small voice if Daddy was mad at us. I said he was just in a mood. She asked if he was sleeping in the other room because he did not want to be our family anymore. The question hit harder than any of Ruth's words. I told her he liked to read late and did not want to wake us. She stared at the window, not convinced. Just then, as we inched forward in the pickup line on another day, Elias walked past our car on his way out of the school office. His phone lit up in his hand. I saw a calendar alert flash for a second. Clinic 2:20 p.m. He tapped it quiet and slipped the phone into his pocket. He glanced at our car but did not wave. Mila watched him go in the mirror, eyes wide. By the time I admitted something was wrong, it was not because I felt guilty. It was because things were not going my way. The roof videos spread faster than I thought. Cassie had posted a clip of me leaning into Elias, raising my glass, saying something about scared little husbands. She tagged me. People reacted with laughing emojis and little flames. Some of our friends from school and the building followed those tags back to my profile. Suddenly, my DMs were full of half-serious jokes about trading up and, "Girl, you're wild." It should have felt fun. Instead, it felt like light shining in the wrong places. At work, Marina stopped laughing at my stories. When I tried to show her a meme about jealous men, she gave a small, tight smile and said she had to finish a report. Cassie still backed me, but even she joked that I was playing with fire in a hot way. Damien came by my desk less. When he did, he kept the door to his office more open than closed. HR had clearly spoken to him too, and now he was being careful. It annoyed me. I had taken the hit, and he got to be the cautious, professional one. I complained about all of this in the gym locker room after a late class. 2 women I knew from the building, Ria and Hannah, listened while changing. I told them my husband had basically turned my boss into a scandal just because he could not handle his own feelings. I said I almost lost my job because he could not stand seeing another man praise me. Ria asked if Elias had actually done anything, like call HR. I did not have proof, but I said I was sure he had pulled strings somehow. It sounded strong, like I understood the game. They shook their heads and called him controlling. I liked that. It meant my story was landing. When I got home that night, the apartment looked different in small ways. The guest bedroom door was wide open, bed made with crisp corners. On the desk, next to the laptop, lay a single USB stick. It was labeled with a date in black pen, nothing else. Next to it, the laptop screen was still on. I stepped closer and saw a clean desktop. No random icons, just 2 neat folders named Archive A and Archive B. The sight made my stomach jump. It looked like something from an office, not from our messy home. Before I could click anything, I heard Elias in the kitchen. I called out and asked when he had become a filing clerk. He came to the doorway, wiped his hands on a towel, and said he was just backing things up. I asked if he meant our life. He looked at the USB and said calmly that it was good to have copies when people remembered things differently. I told him that sounded creepy. He said it sounded careful. At dinner, the distance was no longer hidden. Mila sat between us, asking small questions we both pretended not to hear. She asked why Daddy's bed was different now. Elias said he snored and wanted to let us sleep. I snorted and said maybe he just liked writing in the dark with his little notebook. Mila looked from one of us to the other, and then quietly changed the subject to her art project. The silence hurt more than shouting would have. That night, after she was in bed, I decided I was done waiting for him to come back to normal. I walked to the guest room and knocked on the open door. He sat at the desk, headphones around his neck, phone face down beside the laptop. Papers were stacked in a tidy pile, all clipped and labeled. The shredder sat unplugged, full of thin strips. I asked him if he was enjoying his new little office. He said he was enjoying having space to think. I told him he could think in our bed like a normal husband. He said it did not feel like our bed anymore. That comment stung, so I aimed back. I said, maybe if he had been more of a man earlier, I would not need my boss to see me. His jaw clenched, but he did not shout. He just reached for his phone and tapped the side, like he was stopping it from sliding. I kept going. I said I was tired of being treated like a criminal for doing my job. I said everyone was on my side. I said his own sister thought he was overreacting. He replied that Jenna had told him she was worried about me. I scoffed and said he was twisting words again. He shook his head. He said he had stopped trying to convince me. He was just collecting what was actually happening. That sentence gave me a chill. I asked what that meant. He said calmly that he had messages, videos, posts, dates, his own notes. He said he did not need to argue about memories when there were records. I told him only cowards hid behind screens and files instead of talking. He said we had been talking for months and nothing changed. It was time to be more formal about some things. The phrase sounded strange in his mouth. His phone lit up briefly on the desk. I saw the top of a notification before it dimmed. Paper drop, 3:55 p.m. It looked like an alarm label. I pointed and asked if he was dropping love letters now. He said it was a reminder for some paperwork he needed to deliver. I laughed hard and asked if he had a secret baby somewhere. He did not smile. He just turned the phone over so the screen was down. From then on, his behavior shifted in small but sharp ways. He started writing the date at the top of the whiteboard on the fridge each morning. He noted who would pick up Mila, what time he left for work, when I said I had after-hours events. He did it in a neat, plain style, like a log. When I teased him about running an investigation, he said it was a simple schedule so there were no misunderstandings. It made me feel watched, even when he was not in the room. I responded the only way I knew, by telling my side louder. I made longer posts online about partners who weaponize silence and emotional control that is not obvious at first. I never used his name, but everyone knew. I posted a photo of my hand on a coffee mug, no ring visible, with a caption about learning my worth even when someone tries to erase it. Comments poured in. People called me strong, brave, independent. That rush of attention drowned out the cold fear in my chest. One afternoon, I met Damien at a co-working cafe instead of the office. I told myself it looked better to keep some distance from the company building. The place was full of laptops and soft music, couples whispering over slideshows. He bought my coffee, chose a table in the corner, and opened his laptop. He said HR had reminded him about boundaries. He said he could not appear to favor one person too much. I said I understood, but my voice shook. He asked if things at home were okay. I told him my husband was obsessed with making me look crazy. I said he was sleeping in the guest room, keeping logs, probably spying on my posts. Damien frowned and said carefully that if things were that tense, maybe I should cool the public drama until it settled. I heard the warning, but took it as him being scared of mess. I said men always wanted women to be quiet when things got uncomfortable. He looked uncomfortable himself and changed the subject back to work. When I got home that evening, the apartment was calm. Mila was drawing on the floor, Ruth sitting nearby. She said Elias had asked her to supervise some bedtime routines while he ran errands. That sounded stiff and formal in her mouth. I asked where he had gone. She said he had just said downtown, and that he would be back soon. Later, after Ruth left and Mila was asleep, Elias came home with no bags, no signs of errands. He went straight to wash his hands, then to the guest room. I followed. I told him we needed to stop this Cold War. I said we should either fight it out or forget it. He shook his head and said fighting had only made things worse. I told him he was punishing me by pulling away. He said he was protecting himself and Mila. I raised my voice then. I said he was weak, hiding behind notebooks and reminders instead of looking me in the eye and acting like a husband. I said any real man would fight for his marriage. He looked at me for a long moment, then his face settled into something almost calm. He said, in a quiet voice, that there was nothing left to fight over the way I wanted. He said I had made our life into a story for other people, turned him into a joke on purpose, and treated his pain like content. He said he was done arguing about it. I asked what he planned to do then, just live in the guest room forever. He shook his head. He said he was going to handle this properly. I laughed in his face. I asked what that even meant. I told him he did not know how to be proper about anything, that he was just some IT guy with spreadsheets and anxiety. He did not react. He just picked up his phone from the desk. For a second, I saw the screen, a thread near the top named Follow Up, with new messages marked. He locked it before I could read more. Without raising his voice, he said again that he would handle it properly and that I should make sure I read everything carefully when the time came. The way he said read made something ice-cold in my spine. I told him he was trying to scare me. He said I had not been scared of anything for a long time. The next week at work, I walked into the tower lobby with my coffee, ready to play the brave, mistreated wife. Cassie waved from security. I was halfway to the elevators when a man in a vest stepped in front of me, said my full name, and asked me to confirm it. I did. He placed a thick envelope in my hand and said I had been served. On top, divorce petition, temporary orders, a detailed parenting schedule with Mila listed under primary weeknight care, Elias Hart. I looked up. Elias watched from the revolving door, then turned and walked out,